Welcome back to the CP Performance Podcast. So I know it's been a long while, but we decided to take a bit of a break with content release, especially with everything that was going on with regards to COVID and the lockdown and our family situation and things like that. So we took a little break to spend more time with family, really, and as I've been preaching before in previous episodes, make sure that I'm dedicating enough time to them. So thank you for your patience, but mostly I want to thank the sponsors for their patience and for sticking with us. They've been incredible, and I wouldn't be able to keep doing this without them. So a huge thank you to the sponsors. You'll also be excited to know we're announcing the 5 winners to the ColourFit subscription, so a massive thank you to Dr. Thomas Little and the guys at ColourFit for that. Just catch those names at the end of the episode. So I won't ramble on too much more, but I just want to quickly introduce you to today's guest. So it's Paul Parker. So I know Paul as a strength and conditioning coach from the women's game over in England. So he was at Sunderland and then at West Ham when I was at Chelsea. So he'll do a proper introduction, but let's get into things. Before we get started, just a quick message from our sponsors. First of all, I want to thank Player for staying on for the second series. So Player is the new smart football fitness tracker which utilises GPS technology to give you personalised sports science advice. For more information, visit playarsmartcoach.com. So next I want to introduce you to some new sponsors for this series. ColourFit is a nutrition app that has taken pro sport by storm, boasting 8 former Premier League champions and Rugby Premier, European and Six Nation winners as customers. ColourFit empowers users to achieve their goals and make nutrition simple, practical and evidence-based. This series is also sponsored by Sportland Training and Fitness. So Sam Portland is an elite strength and conditioning coach who's worked with multiple international athletes from many different sports for over 10 years. And he's now producing some fantastic online coaching manuals that outline the progressions for all things from speed to long-term athlete development. These plug-and-play strategies are helping coaches all over the world to organise and structure their training in a much more efficient and effective way. And because you're a listener of this podcast, Sam's given you a gift of 10% off. So all you have to do is use the code POD when you check out and you'll get 10% off of your product. So when you finish listening to this episode, head into our bio straight away, find the link to coachsportland.co.uk and go and get yourself 10% off of his coaching manuals. Finally, CP Performance have teamed up with vxsgymwear.com. So if you want to get 10% off their high quality gym wear, both male and female ranges, then look in our bio for a link or quote on checking out Joseph W, all in capitals. Welcome to this episode of the CP Performance Podcast. So today's guest is Paul Parker. So he's from PR Performance, and I know Paul. I've known him for a good few years now. Actually, I've known him through the women's game through WSL. But I'm not going to ramble on too much, mate. Can you give us a good introduction? What you do, where you've come from, and how you got to where you are right now, basically.
Yeah, sure, no problem. First off, thanks for having us on the
pleasure.
podcast. I'll start at the very beginning. So I was born in London in Middlesex, and moved north when I was kind of 2 years old, back towards the northeast Lincolnshire. So I grew up in Grimsby, and as a kid was I've played pretty much every sport under the sun, but like everyone who works in sport, was never really good enough to make it in any of them. I went to sixth form college and kind of split my studies between, I did my A-levels in sport, law and English. I actually did better in law than I did in sport in terms of academically, and I was kind of always to and fro in which route I wanted to go down. And at that stage I kind of thought, well, if I ended up working in sport, then I'd be pretty happy getting out of bed in the morning. And so I pursued that and went further northeast, and went to Northumbria University in Newcastle. Did my undergrad there in applied sport and exercise science, which I really enjoyed. Some really good tutors and lecturers were on the course at the time and are still on that course. I followed that up by applying and getting onto the Masters in Strength Conditioning at the same university, so at Northumbria as well. I think I was on the third cohort of students, I think. So the programme hadn't been running that long. And at the time, it was being ran by Professor Mark Russell, who's since moved on. But again, we had some really exposure to some really good tutors through that program. So Kevin Thomas is still there and still delivers on that program, and we had Duncan French, Nick Grantham delivered, Joel Brannigan delivered. So we had some really good exposure in terms of the teaching through that. While I was doing my masters, I also had an internship within the strength and conditioning department at the university, which was a really growing department. The time when I was interning, there was Joel Brannigan was the head of. Richard Eaton, who's now at Newcastle University, he was, I think that year he'd just gone full time, and then we had quite a big intern and volunteer team. I was really fortunate in that the summer following my masters, the university kind of really decided to expand that department, and every year that I was at Northumbria, actually, it sequentially got a little bit bigger each year. So Joel moved on to go to Durham County Cricket Club, and Nick Ridging came in as head of department, and myself and two others were given what was initially part-time roles within the S&C department. So myself, Jack Dent, who is now working at the Sports Surgery Clinic in Santry, and Tom Walton, who's now at the Scottish Institute of Sport. The three of us got part-time roles, and then again within a year they became full-time roles. So we were really fortunate in that outside of Loughborough, I don't think there are too many other universities that can boast having 4 full-time strength and conditioning coaches on the staff, looking after the performance programme, and then we had a really good intern and volunteer structure beneath us. Whilst I was at Northumbria, I was also kind of doing bits and pieces at Sunderland, primarily working within the women's setup. So initially, just through contacts at the university, I was working with the development squad, so 16 to 21s, mainly 2 nights a week and match days. Just again, we used to, at that time we were training out of the Academy of Light, so the same facility that the men's first team were using, and we were training quite late at night essentially. So we were training after what was then the WSL team as well. So I can't remember the exact times, but we weren't finishing until 10:30, I don't think. I did that for about, I think I did 1 full season with the development team before I stepped up to work with the WSL team. I actually did both for a little while as well, still alongside my full-time job at the university, but then eventually transitioned to working with Sunderland's WSL side, initially through the spring series, and then I did 1 full season as well after it transitioned back to being a winter league. Then the end of 2017 / the start of 2018, I took quite a big decision and accepted a job to go out and work in the US. So I actually, through some contacts that I made again through people at the university, basically I made the decision to move out and work within the NWSL for a club, to work in Boston again with Matt Beard. Everything was kind of provisionally agreed, and he was there at the time, and there were a few things in terms of a club takeover, and it was a massive decision to me at the time. I've been with my now ex-partner for about 4 years, but we made the decision to I was going to move out and give that a go, and then within a couple of days after the NWSL draft for that season, Boston Breakers kind of folded and were liquidated and removed from the league. So that obviously fell through, which was a little bit of a bummer at the time. I'd already handed in kind of the notice on my apartment that I was living in. I was all ready to go, which kind of left a little bit of a lull period through the start of 2018, and I was kind of looking at other opportunities. I decided that I really wanted to go out and step into professional sport full time. And then, as it so happened, Matt ended up coming back to England and taking on the project at West Ham, who had just been accepted into the WSL for the first time. It's actually, funnily enough, how West Ham were promoted 2 tiers to come into the WSL, and Sunderland, who I'd been working for previously, were basically relegated 2 tiers due to the lack of kind of financial resource that they were able to, in terms of evidence that they were able to provide to the WSL. So in the June of 2018, I moved down to London to work full-time at West Ham and kind of oversee all the physical prep side of things, so sports science, S&C and nutrition. That was a massive challenge, purely because it was a completely blank slate. Before that, again, they were an amateur side, so they trained 1 or 2 times a week in the years previous, and all of a sudden that first year we had, I think, 18 new players come in. Only 2 or 3 of them had played together before. There's quite a large foreign influence in that as well. So I think we had 8 or 9 nationalities in the dressing room in that first year. We had six new staff members come in. There were 2 or 3 who kind of maintained or held their positions from when the club was 2 divisions lower. So that was a really good experience, just in terms of having a complete blank slate to work on and to try and get some protocols and establish kind of a method of working. At the same time, it was really challenging because, like I said, we really didn't have much time, and we were trying to build and set up a professional football club at the same time that we had to run a professional football club. So it was difficult, and we spent those first weeks just basically trying to get to know each other, get a feel for how things worked. But ultimately, we were only 6, 7, 8 weeks away from the season kicking off and needing to get points on the board. So that was a really good experience for me, one that I learnt a lot in. And as well as while I was at West Ham, I kind of had a few bits that I was still doing on the side in terms of some remote coaching from guys that I'd worked with in the North East, different sports, different levels. And I was also still doing a little bit, I still do some lecturing as well. I go back up to Northumbria and do some lecturing every year, which I'm grateful and I really enjoy doing as well. And then that brings me to the end of January this year, so a couple of months ago, where I decided to leave my role at West Ham and step out of professional sport and take the leap to go self-employed. So I set up PR Performance, and yeah, we've been launched, we're now 2nd week of March, so I'm only 6 or 7 weeks in terms of self-employed life. But yeah, that's a very long-winded introduction to where I am
really
now.
A fantastic story to hear, because there's a lot of talk with junior S&C coaches, how do you get a job? How do you land these positions? And just listening to your story and where it's taken you and where it's gone, there's 2 elements in that really stand out. You've got to keep working consistently hard, building your network, things like that, like you say. If you hadn't been as good at what you do and as well trusted up in Northumbria, they wouldn't have given you contacts to get you out potentially to Boston. However, on the back flip side of that, Boston liquidation almost immediately, and then Sunderland complete lack of funding. So that's 2 really poor bits of luck, really bad luck. Like, luck is hugely important in a sports career, whether you're an athlete or a coach. But then again, flip side of that, a really good bit of luck. Beardy moved and brought you down to West Ham. So from what I've, couple of just key points pulling out of that is that if you feel like you're making it, you've still got to be prepared just in case you haven't. Because I know loads of S&C coaches that feel like they've made it and then had their rugs pulled from under their feet, but you still are in a position to utilise your network, bounce back and get a full-time job, which was fantastic. Again, it took a bit of a move from up north down to London, but not quite as big of a move all the way over to Boston.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me, because it was at the time. I remember, as obviously I was speaking to my family a lot about it, and every time it seemed like something really promising was going to come up, it just basically seemed to fall on its face, and that was quite difficult to take to an extent. But just going back to the point in terms of what you said about networking, and in nearly every job that I've had, and I didn't include internships within that, are because of someone's basic recommendation, and because of someone that I know. And obviously everyone talks a lot about networking and the value of building your network, and I think there's sometimes a little bit of misunderstanding, in my opinion, in terms of what that actually looks like. Like there are a lot of young coaches who think that networking and growing a network just means messaging like everyone under the sun, like anyone that's got S&C in their title on LinkedIn, or everyone, and just almost not pestering, but just kind of trying to form loads of kind of superficial links to as many people as they possibly can. But the reason that I've benefited from the relationships that I've been able to build is because, again, and it's only really been maybe like, especially in terms of the ones that have got me job, it's literally 2 or 3 relationships, but they were meaningful relationships in the sense that I'd established good sound professional relationships, and then obviously good on the personal side of things as well, in terms of how I engage with those people in a personal sense. But I think that there's almost I think there's a misunderstanding there in terms of what building your network can be. And I think I'd much rather have 2 or 3 really good, meaningful relationships and people that will happily vouch for me, rather than 200 people who have heard my name because I maybe popped up in their inbox a few
Yeah,
times.
definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think quality over quantity. You can have 10,000 people on LinkedIn, but would one of them give you a job? Whereas if you're actually in a position where you can pick up the phone and have a chat with someone quite regularly, and they don't think, oh, sorry, language, but some of like Griff, for instance, with me, if I message him, he's always like, yeah, let's meet up, let's have a coffee. Like, he's incredible influence and a mentor from a distance, really, more than anything, through my career development and everything as I've grown part of my network. But you got people, I don't know if you're the same, people that used to just message me all the time on LinkedIn. Have you got internship places at Chelsea? Instead of messaging you saying, hi, I'd love to come and see what you do. Can I can I come in, have a coffee with you, have a chat about what you do and why? Instead of just, can I have an internship? Did you used to get that at West Ham?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's it's really easy. Like I kind of have a little bit of a thing, in the sense that whenever I go and again, if I do any lecturing or whatever I do, if I go and speak to, or if I come across any of the coaches, I always kind of say, look, here's how to contact
Yeah.
me. You can message me anytime, and I kind of always make a point of, like, I'll always reply to
Uh-huh.
anyone, because I remember when that was me, kind of thing, and I was trying to speak to people and just getting pied all the
Yeah.
time. And but it's very easy to then, people will message me and make contact and stuff, but it's very easy to kind of filter out and realize very quickly that who's basically just copied and pasted a message, and are just trying to pester as many people as they can, and who's in a position where they're actually trying to, like you say, show a genuine interest, and kind of actually show a little bit of intrigue into gaining a little bit more insight, and they're actually quite clearly curious into you as a person and a professional as well. But yeah, I think that's massive. And I mean, I'll still reply to people, but it's quite easy to kind of wean out who the genuine kind of people, because you have to be genuine. And I know people, everyone's desperate for a job, and especially young coaches, they're desperate to get a foothold and get a foot on the ladder. But like you said there, you'd rather have one person that's going to recommend you than 10,000 people that just about
Yeah,
remember
I
your
think you
name.
summed it up quite nicely. And networking is massively misunderstood. It shows as well, for me, if you can build a relationship with another coach, it shows that actually you're a people person and you need to be able to build relationships to be a successful coach. And if you're willing to invest that time in getting to know and understand another coach, then you're going to show to them that you're willing to invest that time into the athlete as well. That's always something I've found quite interesting, is that you can't be a good successful coach or hold a job in a club for a long time if the players that you're working for don't get on with you and don't like you, because ultimately the manager will give you a job but the players will get you out of it.
Yeah, I think that's massive as well. And you speak whenever we speak to, obviously you'll know from your time at Chelsea and in previous work as well. If for example, say one of the Chelsea players, and they were going off on international duty, and you didn't know much maybe about who was leading that S&C program when they're out there. If you said to that player, "Oh, what's such and such like?" They never reply, or they very rarely reply with what they're actually like as a coach. The first thing they'll always say is something based around who they are as a person, and it's exactly the same. Obviously, when I was at West Ham, we had 3 girls who you'd worked with formerly at Chelsea, in Bex,
Always
Gillian,
bad
and
mouthing
Raf.
me was a
And if I'd say to, yeah, 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 always slating you, yeah.
fair enough.
But if I said to them, I was like, oh, how did you find working with Joe and stuff? The first thing that would come out of their mouth would always be like, oh yeah, like Joe's great, such a lovely guy, and all this. And I'm not saying that, obviously you still need to be able to coach and you still need to be able to get results, but ultimately, like, I think that personal side is what, like you said there, that keeps you in the job, and that's how you forge relationships, which probably get you your
Yeah, I
next job.
think it's crucial. I think it's under massively underestimated. People are starting to, take an interest in the soft skills in the job, because ultimately we're all spinning the same wheel. So everyone knows what strength and conditioning is and knows how to get people stronger and fitter and faster. And you can go and read that up. Lots and lots of resources and extra CPD and stuff on that. So it is the softer skills that are actually setting coaches apart now. Okay, so stepping away from that, then I want to ask you a little bit about the differences you may have seen between kind of Sunderland's part-time program and West Ham's full-time program, and how that impacted you as a coach, and your daily kind of routines, and more how that impacted your lifestyle, going from that, part-time lecturing and doing the other stuff to actually being fully engrossed with just one team.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. It's probably, and I mean, the answer might probably come as a little bit of a surprise as well. But I think, in terms of as a coach, I actually did some of my best work, and I enjoyed my work probably more at times when I was with Sunderland, especially in that last season. We were incredibly under resourced, so we were no longer training at the Academy of Light. We were using one of the university's almost forgotten facilities, which was essentially a rugby pitch and once a week trimmed over football pitch. And we were training out there. We had no GPS. We hardly had anything, to be honest. But I actually think that almost galvanised, especially the squad. I think it almost galvanised the squad in terms of what the players had to go through, and it would have been really easy for them to kind of throw the towel in and just kind of say this is rubbish, or not doing this. What's the point? But it was really interesting at the time. I mean, my contracted hours at Sunderland, even at that time in that final year, was I can't remember exactly what it was, but it might have been 4 hours a week. I think my contracted hours, but I think I was easily doing over 20, 25. It was basically a part-time job on top of my full-time one at the uni. But I was of the stance that no, that these are playing in the top flight of the women's game in England, and they're playing up against like your Chelsea's, Arsenal's, Man City's and stuff. And how do you expect them to compete if you're trying to give them a level of service that's absolutely nowhere near that? And I understand there's financial restraints, and they're not going to compete with those. And again, and they had success at Sunderland. Like came fifth in the spring series and finished seventh in that last WSL season, with again a squad of players who, I think in that final year, I think we had 11 or 12 of the players were classed as full time, and the rest were made up of either part time or university students. So we had the players that were full time were essentially coming in, and they'd do their S&C work in the day at the university, actually. And then all the players would then train in the evening. And then I was trying to balance, obviously, some of the players that had full-time jobs. A lot of them were in teaching, as an example. So they were in school early in the morning. Their S&C obviously had to be self-governed or first thing in the morning. And that was difficult, and just kind of juggling that within that environment was a challenge, but it taught me a lot. And again, because I didn't have anything in terms of, there was no data to go back on, there was no nothing really. It kind of almost underpinned my kind of grounding as a coach, in the sense that you really need to get to know every individual. You need to know them as people and what makes them tick, and you get a sense pretty easily of when it's a good day, when it's a bad day, when they're feeling what they're feeling, kind of, and so on. And that was really interesting. Then obviously to go to West Ham and to be given a kind of a blank slate. And although we had some teething issues at the start, we moved into Rush Green with the men's first team and kind of shared a lot of facilities with the men's first team, and that was completely different. And all of a sudden we had kind of a 7 or 8 full-time staff, and obviously all the players were full-time. None of them were coming straight from school or anything like that, and it just changed perspective slightly. But it's difficult. It's easy to say that obviously West Ham was better than Sunderland in terms of what was available, but in terms of, I think we managed to create a really good environment in that Sunderland team and that squad, and some of the members of staff. almost in spite of what we had. And I think it goes to show that those having all the bells and whistles doesn't always guarantee you results, and it doesn't always have to be the be all and end all. But yeah, then obviously moving to West Ham was different. We set everything up from scratch. I was essentially a one-man department in terms of the sports science S&C side of things. Worked with the medical departments. Had really good physio, EJ, and Jacko's the therapist, who's really good with his kind of RTP stuff as well. So worked closely with them, but other than that, it was kind of I still felt quite isolated in the sense that it was kind of going to be up to me to try and set up a lot of stuff and get a lot of things moving. And I was doing that kind of right up to the point that I left in terms of still trying to get things off the ground. And I think in hindsight now that I've stepped back away from that, and it's difficult. I think I was trying to do too much at times. I'm incredibly curious as a professional and as a person, and I think I was trying to do probably too many things, which maybe pulled away from quality of certain areas. And I mean, you're the same as me, really, in that whenever I'd either whether it was through delegation or refining a process, and you free up some time, you just fill that time with something else. And that's how I generally worked. And I'd refine a system in terms of whether it was how we collect and feedback data. I think, oh, nice one, that saved me like an hour after training every day. And then for me, I just think, okay, so what am I going to do in that hour? And then I'd go down the rabbit hole and something else, and I'd get all the multi-mechanical modelling stuff set up, and I'd get all that done. And then after a few weeks, that's running well, and then I'd go and do something else. And then all of a sudden, I'm trying to spin 15, 20 plates. And yeah, and obviously that program at West Ham is still moving forwards, and they've got, as you know very well, they've got a very, very capable successor in terms of Colin, who's taken on that role, and I'm looking forward to see how he does in that role, and I've no doubt he'll move it on. He'll move it on a lot more himself as well, and I'm excited to see how he gets on and see obviously how the club get on and how Matt gets
Yeah,
on.
I'm excited to see what he does as well. Having the pleasure of having worked with him for a couple of years over at Chelsea, him basically when I interviewed him for a position with the RTC, I just said straight away to Rob as he walked out the door, I was like, "That's your man." And then the first day we brought him in, I just said to him, "Look, mate, you're being paid to do this job. This is your role. Take the ball by the horns and run with it. You know, it's your program. I'm here for advice if you want it. Otherwise, good luck." And he took it and absolutely ran with it and was brilliant. So, um, enough. It was the same with Harry with the uh, academy side. I did pretty much the same thing with him. Just went to him, "Look, you're being paid to look after them. Go and do it." And I think it was the best thing I ever did as a coach over at Chelsea. Just get highly qualified, relatively experienced lads in and just say, go do your job." Instead of trying to micromanage them. I think that would have been the worst thing because, like you say, you end up when you're focusing on the first team, you end up with so many spinning plates already that you need to be in a position to delegate. So I was very, very fortunate that I could do that, and that the management actually gave me enough of fund, not great funding, but enough funding to be able to be in a position to do that. So they noted that I'd needed the help, and then we got things in place to do that. And I was again very fortunate that I'd got a data scientist, young lad, in again through the men's first team, actually through them and their systems. They brought someone in to do that side of things for me. So I was lucky in the sense that I didn't have to manage all of the GPS. I had someone else to do that. I would not have got out of there if I had to manage that as well. Um, the days were long enough just doing everything else. So very, very fortunate in that sense. Okay, so what would you, if you could go back and change one thing then about the way you did things as a one-man band, what would you do?
Yeah, it's a tough question, and there's certain things that I'd do in terms of from a more like almost like a detailed perspective in terms of the way that I did certain things and the way that I tried to get certain things across. But I think I think one of the biggest things that I learned within kind of, and this isn't necessarily only to within the role at West Ham, but the kind of the 3 or 4 years that I was working after I finished my masters, is that, especially as an S&C coach, we always say how how important recovery is, and basically how that time away from training is going to benefit your training. And I think that's what I realised probably a little bit too late, in that time away from work was going to help my work, and that actually giving myself the time to go and do something else and to actually look after myself was going to have a positive impact on my work. Whereas what I tended to do was just, like I say, just keep throwing myself into something else and keep trying to better something else. And that over a 3, 4, 5 year period, that obviously basically wore me right down. And I think if I was to go back and change one thing, I would have taken. And again, this isn't something that it's by no means something that was forced on me. Matt was always a massive advocate of kind of taking time off and don't come in on this day, don't do any work tomorrow kind of thing. But I was kind of at that point, I just wanted to do things really well, and I wanted to make everything better. And I think, so my thought of how to do that was just to kind of keep working and keep trying to do things, and how can we move the program forward. And I've always had a phrase with me, kind of ingrained from when I was young, actually, from an uncle who used to live out in Greece, and he taught me a few Latin phrases once when I was really young. One of which was meliora, and it's literally the only one that I remember. And it's a Latin phrase for the pursuit of betterment, and like always better. And I remember I had that written on the whiteboard at West Ham, in the sense that, because I wanted to remind myself all the time that everything can always be done better. And I think that was almost to my detriment, I think, in the end. So I think if I could change one thing, I'd give myself a little bit more time and cut myself a little bit more slack. And I think that would have had a positive effect on my ability to kind of design and deliver a more effective program.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial. I think it's becoming more aware of your kind of self awareness now, and more people are taking note of it. Actually, just chilling out and spend, like you say, recovery for yourself as much for the athletes. You know, far too many sports scientists, strength and conditioning coaches are working 12, 14 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week, and not, getting decent sleep, getting decent nutrition. I know for a fact when I was in it, I was terrible. The only time I actually really looked after myself was when I signed up to go and compete in something, and then I was like, right, bang, I'm focused on that. I'm going to get that done, and the players noticed the difference. Otherwise, I'd just be constantly working. But then you get yourself into a bit of a rut, and management go, well, you're not doing as much of your job as you used to, and you're like, yeah, I'm still doing everything to the best of my ability. I'm just probably not doing 900 things. To any kind of new up and coming young S&C coach, what tip would you give then for being aware, self awareness, knowing yourself?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a massively important area. And I think what you were saying there, just from like an hour's perspective and everything else, and obviously I saw you share something that Sam Portman put the other day as well, just in the sense that I think the worst thing about the industry is that kind of behaviour is actually glorified, and it's kind of, and I'll come back to that in a second, actually. But I think one of the best thing for me, in terms of, that I found useful in terms of developing a little bit more self awareness, is actually self distancing, and using strategies to help with self distancing. So almost stepping away from yourself and considering and being able to give yourself advice. If that, and I know it sounds a little bit cliche in terms of from that sense, but if it was a mate and you were watching them do everything that you do, like, what would you be telling them, and what would your genuine advice be for them? And I think being able to self distance just gives you that ability to be able to honestly evaluate kind of where it is that you're going, and then if it's necessary, do you need to shift course, and do you need to apply the brakes? Because it's, like I say, it's very easy just to get your head down, and then all of a sudden you get to whatever point it is, and you're just overwhelmed, or whatever that might be. I think self distancing is massive. Like when I made the decision to step away from football, I did a lot of stuff that I took from Steve Magnus's book, The Passion Paradox, in terms of writing a lot of things down in third person in terms of trying to distance yourself from your thoughts and almost take a step back and then take a day and then go back and kind of almost read it. And that ability kind of got me a little bit of perspective, and it kind of made me realize that, again, like, we're in an industry where that kind of behavior is glorified in the sense that, oh, first in, last out, and you're 12 hours a day and you're minimum 6 days a week, and on your seventh day you may be only in the morning, and whatever that might be. And I think it's really, really important to kind of create that element of self distance and get a little bit of perspective, and be able to, again, it's from the book that I just mentioned, but there's one bit of that kind of stuck with me, and it says how self awareness is probably the only countervailing force that will match the inertia of passion. So if you're so heavily invested in something, the only thing that's ever going to maybe pull you away from that or give you any perspective is actually having self awareness and being able to step out of that and assess what it is. Because and again, I recommend that, especially people in our industry, I'd recommend anyone reads it, because it's a really, really good book, and I read it at the perfect time for me in terms of how relatable a lot of the content was for me. But it allows you to ensure that you're choosing how you pursue your passion, and if and how you pursue your passion, and it's a choice of how you do that, rather than just getting caught up in it and getting almost like I say, caught up in a storm in a teacup, essentially.
I've never read that book, but I'm going to go and buy it off your recommendation because it sounds fantastic.
It is brilliant.
Well, the biggest thing for me when I decided to leave pro sport was obviously having my family, having my kids, because I wasn't fully aware of how much I was sacrificing in my relationship with my wife and stuff like that, and how much I was giving to the job until Sam Portland actually turned around to me and he went, "Mate, when was the last time you had a day off?" I was like, "I don't know," and he went, "What do you mean you don't know?" He was like, "When was the last time you went for a beer?" I was like, "I don't know," and he was just like, "Mate, come on." And then it was literally, he went, "Look at what you're doing. You're putting a massive wedge between you and your family." And I was like, "Oh crap, yeah." And then I sat down and it was my son's birthday, and I couldn't believe how quick that year had gone and how much of his time and life I'd sacrificed. And that's when I was just like, you know what, that's it. For me, that's it. Um, because I must be a sucker for pain or something, or self harm, because I didn't really think anything about myself while I was doing it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm putting on weight, I'm getting more out of shape. I was engrossed in the environment, and I was like, everything I was doing was for them. And then only when I turned around and went, actually, I've missed the whole of my son's first year of his life, that I actually went, wow, what am I doing? And that was a big wake up call for me. So anyone that actually turns around and goes, actually, I need some more time for myself, hands up, applaud you for doing that, because I couldn't recognize it in myself. I almost worked myself into several car crashes on the M25. Thankfully, my wife let me invest in a slightly better car that had lane assist and slowed me down. Uh, but but that's how I got away from my role, And but yeah, I applaud anyone that's actually confident enough and self-aware enough to actually remove themselves from the situation and do things for the better of themselves, because like you say, that's how you become a better coach ultimately. We advocate all the time sleep, recovery, hydration, nutrition to elite athletes, and yet we're the first ones to not sleep, to drink loads and loads of coffee, and to eat fast food while we sit at a desk.
Yeah, massively. And
Yeah.
and again, I was speaking about this to someone the other day, but it's a friend of mine was asking me, just from a career choice perspective, wanted to get a little bit more insight, and kind of almost like struggled to understand my thoughts in some trains of thought. But it's by no means me saying that look, there are incredible coaches who work within, say, professional football, professional rugby full time, like really good coaches, really good people, and they have found a balance and a way for them to excel in that job, and they are still happy within their personal life. And it's by no means a case of me rubbishing anyone who works full time in
No.
those environments still, but it's if that's for them and they can make that work, then great. But I just got to the point where, like I say, you said for you, obviously it was Alex's first birthday, but and I haven't got any kids, so for me it was just I had kind of a little bit of a penny drop that kind of almost got the ball rolling for me, but it just made me think, like I say, your priorities change a little bit, and I thought, can I continue in this? Am I going to have the life that I want to be living in 3, 4, 5 years time if I stay where I am now, or what opportunities, what doors are going to open from the path that I'm currently taking? And for me, that wasn't right. So, whereas for other people, like I say, that gives them the life they want to lead.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Yeah, and I'm not. Each their own. I'm not saying that anyone that sticks to full time coaching is bad.
yeah, no, of course not. Yeah,
I think everyone's got their own way of doing it, and um, you know, one of the interesting things, I had a really good conversation the other day with someone, was about can you see yourself being an S&C coach when you're 40 or 50? And when you look at it, it's like actually not many people retire as S&C coaches. So what is logically the next step from being an S&C coach? Do you go back into academia? Do you then how do you do it? You become performance manager? So we was just having this discussion about it and about how we saw what we was going to do. And for me, I always wanted to go back into academia and then retire as an academic. And then kids come along and my whole perspective and whole career and everything changed because I wanted to change for that. So it's a journey with lots of roads and lots of twists and turns, and you just have no idea what's going to happen around the next corner, do you? So, I have a huge amount of respect for anyone and everyone working in full time sport. I'm not bad mouthing them. The journey changed for me. My pathway, the road veered off in a direction that
yeah,
I wasn't expecting myself to feel that way and go that way. But that's just how it is. Okay, so we alluded a little bit then to kind of understanding recovery and understanding hydration and nutrition. So one of the things I know you've done recently, and you will graduate soon, I believe, is your postgraduate diploma in performance nutrition. So one of the things I did want you to have a little chat about was kind of your ideas in and philosophy in and around that, and what it actually means to you, performance nutrition, because people think of nutrition and then they think of keto diets, or they think of I don't know, intermittent fasting. But from your perspective, what's performance nutrition? What's it all about?
yeah. I mean, it's by no means kind of like you say there. It's not just necessarily this diet or this diet. Like the majority of which, a lot of people just think of nutrition, like you say, as them going on a diet. But I think one of the reasons that I mean, I've always had an interest in nutrition, and then it was only really in the last year and a half, 2 years, that I decided that I was going to get some further education in the area and actually make it a part of my skill set as a practitioner. But one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much is it just as physical training, it all comes back down to kind of that biochemistry element, and it's ultimately it's just human physiology, and it's human biology, human chemistry, and that's the part that I really enjoy. And it's only really since that I've kind of formalised my education a little bit further in nutrition that it's again opened my eyes to how big a part that it can play in adaptation, which is ultimately the role of what we were doing in strength and conditioning and sports science realms, and how it's easy to say that running at X speed for X amount of time and we can roughly expect whatever outcome that might lead to, but having an understanding as well that just simple things like substrate availability will have a massive impact in terms of the adaptation that you're gonna chase, and or the adaptation that you're trying to chase, and that the really subtle ways of manipulating kind of cell metabolism that's either going to enhance or ultimately restrict adaptation through certain pathways. And we kind of had a thing in that, and simple things like in pre-season, as an example, you see loads of times when you're doing your football based, so your specific running work, whatever it is, and you're trying to get that physical adaptation from a fitness perspective, and you see stuff where what you're essentially trying to do is alter the metabolism at cellular level and your ability to turn over substrate. If between every rep, then you're allowing the athlete to pick up a Lucozade Sport and chug half of it back, you're changing the way that the cell is trying to adapt, because your cell's trying to work with the substrate available in terms of trying to produce energy. And then all of a sudden you give it, in between reps, you hit it with a massive supply of glucose that goes straight into your blood, straight to the cell. And all of a sudden that changes the work that needs to be done at a cellular level to produce energy. And it's just little things like that. That's obviously quite a crude example, but just little things like that. And I kind of, before I was, again, it was very easy just to think, okay, so if you're doing a Tabata, you just say, okay, well, it's 20 on, 10 off. This is the speed I need you to run, go. And then just having a little bit of an idea that, well, hang on, we can either further enhance that adaptation or whatever it is that you might be trying to do just by tweaking nutritional strategies. And that, again, people think of it as soon as they hear performance nutrition, they think of it as, like maybe dieting and losing weight, but it's just another part of the puzzle that can help support adaptation. And it's something that I've really tried to push in now within PR Performance and some of the services we provide athletes, in that I'm doing a lot of work at the minute within combat sports with boxers and mixed martial artists, and especially through their camp, where obviously the goal is they need to, it's a weight category determined sport, so they need to make weight. But we're not just setting them daily caloric intake and the macronutrient intake so that they can lose a certain amount of weight. We're trying to aid adaptation, fuel performance, enhance recovery. And then that weight management side is almost a caveat to that, because the goal in that instance, in boxing and mixed martial arts, the goal isn't to make weight. The goal is to win. And just little things like that can kind of have an effect on the adaptation. And again, that's James Morton is one of the best, both academics and practitioners in applied performance nutrition, but he doesn't really see himself as a nutritionist. He sees himself as a physiologist. And I think my kind of falling into nutrition is just kind of, again, the same kind of theme, in that I'm interested in cellular biology, I'm interested in human physiology, and then that is just one way that I can affect that, just the same as having a really good conditioning program could support that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of the nutrition side of things always kind of taken a little bit, excuse the pun, with a pinch of salt when it comes to the management side and things, understanding it. All they kind of think is, just take away ketchup, take away sugars, take away this, take away that. And it's like, well, hang on a second, there needs to be a foundation of what you're doing and why you can't just take and take and take from them. If they need X amount of glucose to recover after a game or whatever, then you need to be giving it to them. You can't just take away. That's not the point. So what's nice is for you to, even though you said it was in quite a crude way, just to allude to the thought process behind what you're doing. Are you eating this to have a positive adaptation and impact your training, and then as a result impact your performance, or are you just eating it because you want to, or has your manager just said you're not allowed it? So that's quite interesting, the thought process behind what you're doing and why, always thinking on a deeper level instead of just no sugar, like, again, very crude. But I do think it's a underutilized area of the holistic management of an athlete, a bit like psychology, really. I think psychology is a little bit underutilized from what I saw in WSL1 clubs anyway. It was kind of just brushed to one side.
Yeah, massively. It's one of them but again, and it's similar in the sense that it's good that you've used the example of psychology, but people only think they need to see a psychologist when there's something wrong, as opposed to, hang on, it's a tool for performance enhancement. And nutrition's exactly the same. Like, people think, maybe their body comp's not where they think it should be, or whatever it might be. So they think, I'll go see the nutritionist. And it's, well, hang on, it doesn't need to be because there's a problem. It's a tool in the toolbox that can ultimately get you
Yeah,
better returns on your training and in your recovery. So it's a good, and I mean it's becoming more utilised again. Same with psychology. You're seeing some of the top clubs now, and I think even again away from WSL, but you look at someone like Eddie Jones and you think, for someone who's renowned as one of the best sports coaches in the world, and it doesn't take long to listen to him speak before he'll refer to kind of whether it's mindset or motivation or whatever it might be. But I think that side of the support service it will certainly continue to grow in the next kind of 5-10 years.
which is needed and a good thing. I think massively
Yeah,
underutilized both performance nutrition and psychology. I think definitely helps a lot. Like some of the more up and coming kind of athletes that I've worked with, like have never ever had any of that kind of support, and if they had, they'd probably be at the professional level a little bit quicker. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of trickles down over the next 5, 10 years to support the semi-pro as well. Because again, if you can maximize potential in the semi-pro or amateur levels and make them better, then you're only going to make the professionals better as well, because the challenge from underneath is greater. So to up
yeah,
their game.
yeah, exactly. I think that's a big part of it, in the sense that there's a lot of bad practice, I think, particularly in nutrition, and again, especially in combat sports. But it's all it is. It's a lack of exposure, and almost like a miseducation or a non-education in some senses, where they've never been told any different. And
Yeah,
it's the same it's no different in football, to a sense. Like, if you've never been told that these certain things can have an influence in your performance, then there's no reason that, if you're a player, that you'd expect it to make a difference. So it's just about trying to, again, improve that athlete understanding and educate practitioners and educate the athletes and the coaches, so that there's a little bit more of an understanding of that, hang on, this can play a massive part in whether we're successful or not.
yeah, I think completely agree. I think it's something that it will grow and it will make a huge impact at all levels, and as people are becoming more aware of it, there's less of a kind of stigma attached to it. You're going to see someone because there's a problem. Actually, no, you're going to see them just to enhance your performance, which is great, which is where it should be. People do need to understand that there is that support is there for them as well. If you are a performance nutritionist, it is there to help performance. Yes, you'll help if there's a problem, but ultimately you want to help snub the issue before it becomes a problem. Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit, and I want to ask you. So, working under the team you worked under at Northumbria, being part of that environment and that culture, and that setup, even not that culture, that setup with 4 full-time S&C coaches and the people who were incredible, learning from some of the best. How did that impact the way you saw your role going into West Ham, and did it influence kind of your thoughts on how you would like to see the performance department built and grow?
Yeah, I mean, especially in that final year/year and a half at Northumbria and up in the northeast, I think my most valuable CPD always came from when, between the 4 S&C coaches that were there, we basically just closed the door and in the office, and someone would be thinking of trying something from a programming aspect, whether it was for volleyball or for the swimmers or whoever it might be, and then again that would spark a discussion in terms of different approaches, because we all see things differently, and ultimately I think that's what's interesting in S&C, is that we're all trying to do the same thing, and yet there's still so much discrepancy between philosophies and how people want to get there, which is fine. But I think that it was really, really good for me to be in that environment where we all had our strengths and we all would kind of lean on different people within the department if we wanted to get a little bit of insight with something, and that was always readily available. And then that was something that obviously when I went to West Ham that was missing essentially, in the sense that, again, if I wanted to spitball something or to brainstorm an idea and get someone's feedback or input that wasn't a technical coach, then I'd have to pick up the phone. I'd have to call someone and have a chat. And I think, again, that's one of the reasons. I mean, the main reasons that I left the role at West Ham are personal, but that's one of the reasons from a professional standpoint that I decided to leave, because I became a little bit frustrated in the sense that I felt like I was stagnating as a professional, purely because I never had anyone really scrutinising what I was doing, or trying to get or trying to challenge me with different bits and pieces. And I think that, and it got to a point where I thought, I'm nearly sleepwalking through work here, and somebody could easily, I could have been doing anything. I could have been in the gym doing anything, and not really anyone. There was ever going to be anyone that was going to say, "Well, hang on, why are we doing this?" And I think that's a massive part, and it's really, really important. And I think that's one of the things that I certainly missed from when I was at Northumbria, as well as having kind of, again, that multi-sport element and being exposed to such a wide variety of athletes, but also just being around coaches and professionals and watching other people coach. And because if I'd have the football team in for an hour, and I'd be immediately followed by men's volleyball or women's basketball, and I'd just hang around in the gym for another 40 minutes, and I'd watch Tom do his warm-up, and then I'd watch how he sets up the primary part of his session. And I think just being in that environment was brilliant. And it's definitely, I think it gets a little bit of a bashing at times, and people kind of think that professional sports at the top of the ring, and then that collegiate level sports a few rungs down. But there's some really, really outstanding coaches working at that level all across the country, and I know I've kind of skewed away a little bit from the question, but I think that was a big element in terms of why I left the role at West Ham, and I'd had discussions with some of the people there in terms of. I mean, I was more fortunate in the second season because I had a sports science placement student come in to work with me. But again, she was between a second and a third year at undergraduate level, so that she was brilliant, really hands-on, really curious, really critical thinker, but at the same time wasn't gonna stick a nose in kind of an aspect of the programming and say, have you considered doing it this way, or whatever that is, if that makes sense.
Yeah. She didn't want to be seen to offend you or anything. She just wanted to work for you and with you and help you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'd had discussions with the general manager and stuff at the club in terms of the feasibility of that moving forwards. And in terms of where I would have liked it to be or wanted it to be, that would have been several years off. And there was maybe some chance of a little bit more support next season. But then I just, again, it was a case like, do I want to wait another year to get one other member of staff in? And yeah, it was, that was one of the big reasons for me.
No, that's fair enough. I had something very similar when I moved from Wasps to Chelsea, um, working under like Ryan Hicks, Ian Taplin, Tom Farrow, Dan Howes, Nick Chad, those guys who all at the top of their game still, like in elite sport over at England Sevens or over in Houston or whatever they're doing now. We're spread all around the globe at the moment. Um, they would meet regularly and just talk, and each one would have an area. Like, so Tom would be looking after a couple certain players, and Nick would be looking after certain players, and within the first team, like me and Ryan would have certain teams in the academy, and we would just sit down and talk about challenges, about different approaches to the program, or different roads to Rome, and it was brilliant to sit and listen into, for my development as well when I was an up and coming S&C coach. And then when I went over to Chelsea, I had something very similar to you. First about 18 months with no one challenging anything, and then we'd brought in a physio, Aaron Duffy, the Australian fella, who had the Australian strength and conditioning qualification level 1 as part of his physio degree out in Australia. And he was the first person at that club to actually turn around to me and go, "Well, have you thought of this?" And it's like, "Oh, that's brilliant. That's what I needed." So that
Yeah.
was the instigator to keep me there early on. And then eventually they did allow me to bring in like Harry and Colin, like we said, and they would just question the life out of everything, challenge me beyond belief. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
You do need that in you just to stop you from stagnating. And it's no good bringing in interns either, because interns want to be there and want to help and want to learn, and they don't always want to challenge, especially if they're slightly younger. Had a really good young lad work with us for a season called Jed Knights, who looked after our EDS squad for just under half a season. But he didn't want to. I think he felt if he'd asked certain questions or asked, have you thought of it this way, he'd offend me, and now he's doing really well. He's a really good lad, very clever bloke. He did a masters in rehab at St Mary's as well, and I see recently he did some stuff with England Sevens under Tom as well. And he, I feel like he was in a position where he's like, well, if I asked or if I challenged, then I'm gonna get kicked out of here, instead of actually just being like open enough to just go, Joe, what do you think of this? So it's a very tough position to be in, because you rightly say you want to be in a position where you're being challenged, you're learning, you're developing, you're growing. But you can only do that if you're bringing in members of staff who are paid, because for a fact if they're paid, they've gone through an interview process, a more stringent process to get them into a position. They've got the qualifications. So 9 times out of 10, they've got a decent bit of experience as well. And I'm not saying that they need to be paid. What I'm trying to kind of allude to is that interns don't typically want to do that because they don't want to be seen to offend. Whereas they probably need to, because it's great being in a position where someone challenges your thinking, your philosophy, and your theory, and then you then have to justify it to them. That's one of the things I loved about working in the women's game, was that the players would do that. The players would always ask me, well, why am I doing this? And why is this different? And why are we doing extra running? And why is the running at this time and this distance and blah, 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 and all that. I think that was one of the biggest things I learned about being in the women's game, was that the female athletes would do that, whereas some of the staff wouldn't. Whereas in the men's game, male rugby previously, the players wouldn't always do that, but the staff would. That was my biggest learning from the two.
Yeah, I mean, the placement student Amy, who had working with me at West Ham this season, obviously she'll be working with Colin now, but I kind of said that to her from day one, in the sense that, look, I don't take anything personally. I take pretty much nothing personally at all. So I said, literally, just like, ask me why. Like, don't be afraid to ask me why. And if you go away and you read something and that contradicts what I'm doing, then just come in the next day and tell me, and we'll talk about it. And after the first month, maybe 2 months, she did get a lot better at that, in the sense that she was quite comfortable in saying, well, why, or what's the point of that, or would it not be better to do it this way? But then, like you say, you get it. I mean, we got it from. It's interesting that the whole time I was at West Ham, really, it was always the same players, if that makes sense. But I wouldn't say it was
Chile,
all
one of them.
Yeah, Julie was all right, to be honest, in terms of
Oh, really?
just kind of got on with it. Yeah, I can't really ever recall her. I mean, I used to in
Mate, she
pre-season.
always used to ask me questions.
Yeah, and she used them all up on you. But no,
Probably. She's a buffalo with BS, so she'd had enough.
yeah. No, Julie's spot on, and like really
Yeah.
good in that sense. And I mean, in pre-season, I used to always say, especially when we were doing running stuff, or whether it was in season, we were doing running, and especially if we'd kind of blocked it so that it was at the end of the session, I'd always say to them, right, you've got 10 seconds to moan and whinge and do what you want to do, and then we're starting. And they, but there's maybe 3, 4, 5 that were maybe like, why do we do this, or my old club we did this, or whatever that might be. But yeah, especially, I mean, I don't want to say that the second season was any worse, but especially that first season, everyone was brilliant in terms of just getting on with it and cracking on. And then, yeah, same in the second season. We signed a young girl from Australia called Jacinta, and she was a little bit of a nightmare in that sense. But she only did it to wind me up. She never actually cared why we were doing it. She just wanted to be annoying.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you always get characters like that, don't you? And that's kind of the beauty and the art
Yeah.
of coaching. Managing those that like to be annoying. G was one of those for me that she would do it whatever we asked her to do. She'd do it, but she'd always kick up a bit of a fuss, a little bit of a Princess G. She'd be like, "Oh, I don't want to run. I don't want to do this. I don't want to gym." And then you'd say to her, "Look, G, it's for your benefit," and she'd go, "Oh, okay," and just get on with it. And you're like, "Well, what was the fuss about?" And she's like, "Ah, I just felt
All
like
right,
making
okay.
it." And you're like, "Oh, right,
Cheers.
okay, yeah, fair enough." Cheers, G. But no, she was brilliant. She was good fun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now, just briefly, because I don't want to eat up too much more of your day, because I know you're a busy man. What exactly are you doing now, and what does the road look like for Paul? And if people want to find you, where can they find you? Social media and stuff like that.
Yeah. So at the minute, obviously, I'm working out. I'm still based in East London, so I'm working out of East London in terms of delivery. Still doing quite a little bit of remote work. Fortunately, doing a little bit of online and remote work with quite a few players within the women's game, both domestically and overseas. And then the whole premise of what I want to deliver is I don't want to just put out a package that looks like you're not spending your money for per session, if that makes sense. Like, I want people to really get a feeling that they're investing in the service, and that's why, like, on the website, there's no prices of the services I offer, because it's completely dependent on that individual and what they need and what fits with them. So just trying to get people through the door in the sense to start a conversation, and then almost coming back with a proposal of, this is how I think I can help you, this is what I think will be a benefit to you, and then this is how I think we can implement that. And if they turn around and say, no thanks, I'm not interested, then that's fine. And then likewise, if I have that initial chat with someone, I think, look, I don't really think I'm the right person to help you, then I'll tell people. um, I'm doing a lot of work at the minute within combat sports, so within boxing and mixed martial arts, and grappling, which I'm really enjoying. Really enjoying getting stuck into that, but still doing a little bit within field-based sports and kind of moving back towards a little bit of a multi-sport model, where boxing and combat sport is probably the base of the pyramid, if that makes sense. Got some really exciting things in the pipeline for the next couple of months. One big element that I'm probably not in a position to say just yet, but some really exciting stuff that's really going to help us go to the next level. I'm working kind of with another coach, guy Ricky McFarlane, who's a brilliant coach, and he's gained tons of experience. He's been worked with Travis and Travis Mash in the US for a while before I come back, and he's been working within boxing and MMA for a long time. And so me and him have got a few really exciting bits in the pipeline. So yeah, just looking to continue to move that forward, as well as trying to get a little bit more things in place that are more general, in the sense of like a little bit of ebook content and some more online stuff, just to help kind of, again, people that maybe don't have, whether it's logistical or whether it's financial, maybe unable to commit to too much of the service, and just trying to get some good resources out there. Website is prperformance.uk, and my email address is just prperformance@hotmail.com. And again, Instagram is just _prperformance. That's the same on Twitter as well.
Lovely, awesome, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to your journey, your story, your work, pearls of wisdom in and around kind of getting to know and understand what nutrition is about, instead of just thinking it's about diet. Actually think about the underpinning processes behind it. It's an absolute pleasure. Again, talking, like, you know me, man. Whenever I get on the phone to you, I can chat to you for hours, and we always talk random stuff. But to actually go through some decent structure and talk about some good bits, like, learn an awful lot. And I'm gonna go buy Steve Magnus's book as well. Start looking after myself a little bit better. Yeah, I just want to thank you for that, mate, and leave it there. Really, there's nothing more I can say. It was fantastic to listen to.
No, likewise, mate. Really, obviously always good chatting. So, and then, as I touched on earlier, if anyone wants to get in touch or has any questions or just wants to chat about anything, like I say, I'm an open book. So people, just any of the methods that I just touched on there, just feel free to get in touch and can chat anytime. And then obviously, likewise with yourself, I'm sure we'll catch up soon over a beer or over a coffee.
Oh, most definitely. I need one.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah, anytime, mate. All right, bud.
Okay, so the moment you've all been waiting for. So first of all, a massive thank you to Dr. Thomas Little and the guys at ColourFit. So make sure you give them a follow at colour_fit. And okay, here we go. So the first winner, Catherine Turner and Sunny Crossman, Emily Patel, James Dempsey and Joseph O'Rourke. So you guys will get a direct message from me, and I'll sort it all out from there. Thank you very much. Just want to thank you for listening to this episode. I want to encourage you to like and follow us on social media, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at CP Perform UK, and also check our bio for links to all of our sponsors.